everybody. I am the founder and head unicorn at SCYTHE, and I am joined by my longtime angry, ranty friend, Tim Malcolm-Vetter. It seems to be the kinds of folks that I collect in industry. Tim, who are you and what do you do?
Apparently, I gave you the angry, ranty introduction once upon a time. That's what I am. I'm a dude that's been doing cyber for 20-something years, and I guess that's probably entitles you to ranty opinions from time to time. Done red team pen testing, offense, defense, done it all. Ran a large managed SOC. Now I'm trying to shake up the managed detection and response world with a brand new automated MDR offering from our startup called WireSpeed. And yeah, and it's good fun.
All right. Well, obviously your background is, I think, known to many, although you gave a good summary of it, and that does entitle you to the ranty opinions that you are allowed to have. But unlike most folks and the nerds who just shake their pale little fists at whatever angers them, or write some janky script, pretty much any red team, you, in fact, went and started something. So why don't we talk about that? Why did you start WireSpeed?
Ooh, good one. I started WireSpeed because I didn't like any of the options that are out there. Where to begin? One of the biggest problems is that we talk about mean time to respond, and to a lot of MSSPs, mean time to respond is I threw an email or a ticket over the wall at you. And then a customer gets the ticket and they look at it and go, okay, this suspicious thing happened. I need to now go investigate it. And then at some point down the road, they're going to get enough of these and they're going to ask the provider, aren't I paying you to investigate these? Why am I getting them and then having to reinvestigate them? Why is this the case? And just questions around transparency. Why is it slow? Why is it human? Like when you have human led, you're basically selling access to the SOCs. You're selling access to people. And like certain alerts come in different, there's so many like we could go off this. Like, for example, usually when you buy this, you buy it off of SLAs related to severities, right? Like a SEV 1 or critical case, maybe it's a 1 hour SLA, pretty typical. How do you know it's a SEV 1 until after it's triaged? Stop and think about that. How do you know it's critical until someone's looked at it and said, this is really critical? And the answer is you don't. What you do is you take a lot of times Palo Alto says it's critical. So you take it and you go, it's critical. And then you look at it and go, oh, this is actually really just garbage. We didn't work it. But here's this thing that came in that didn't have a severity or wasn't a good severity. Turns out it was actually actionable. And we didn't get it to it till 8 hours, 12 hours later or whatever. So anyway, we try to fix all that stuff. We also break the fourth wall of cyber. I got a blog about breaking the fourth wall, like talking to the audience, that sort of thing. Managed SOCs and even internal SOCs a lot of times do not like talking to victim users of cases. Right? Like that's like a hard no, don't do it. We lean in hard. We do Slack, Teams, email. We reach out. We ask them about things because a lot of times, man, they know better than anyone else, right? And I got the idea for this when I always tell the story. We're going on a family road trip and we're driving, I don't know, hours away. Load up the Starbucks gift card, get everyone coffee, and it's $25, right? Get a few more hours down the road. You're like, man, I need more. Oh, got to reload the gift card, $25. And then the credit card company goes, did you mean to do 2 transactions? And I text, email, whatever. I'm like, if the credit card companies can figure this out with all the fraud out there, why in the world can't we just do stuff like this with cyber? So that's the kind of thing we'll do. We'll see a suspicious login and we'll say, hey, Bryson, did you just log in from Tahiti? And you'll go, yes. And I'll go, I'm a red teamer. I don't trust you. I'm assuming I'm talking to a bad guy. So I'm going to do a couple things out of band to MFA you and prove it's really you. And even like things like I'll send you a one-time passcode over SMS. But guess what? If I saw your directory had an updated phone number in the last 48 hours, I'm not even talking to you. I just really think that you're a bad guy. You've taken over the account. Now you're pretending you're capturing all the comms and the one-time passcodes or whatever. And I'm just gonna say no to all that. And I'm going to go to your manager and we're going to loop them in and we're going to just crowdsource the resolution of this problem, to the manager, like, hey, Bryson's manager, is Bryson really traveling to Tahiti? Yes or no? And that sort of thing. So we do stuff like that. It's really cool. We got a bunch of stuff on there, but the big thing that leans back to today's topic is if you're going to automate and you're going to, like, we have so much automation everywhere. A year and a half ago when I was starting to think about building WireSpeed, I thought at the time, like, we were going to have to educate everyone to get everyone comfortable with automating things, like potentially autonomous decisions. And the market's largely come around and like people are going, yeah, I don't care anymore. I wrote a blog post about this not that long ago. I was expecting 1,000 Rotten Tomatoes. I didn't get a single peep. And like, it didn't even like ripple. I posted it like in 8 places and it didn't even, there's not even anything in the water back at me. Right. I was like, what in the world? Like everyone's fine with the idea. Like the mission of WireSpeed is we're getting rid of the SOC analyst. We want to take that, all the people in that role, and give them threat hunter, incident response, engineer positions, maybe, purple team positions, validating detections, that sort of thing, but not sitting in a case or sitting in a queue, swiping left and right on cases all day long with air traffic controller level stress about am I deciding right or not? Like that's not good for people. It's not good for the result. Like you're gonna have a bad night with kids. You're up sick all night or whatever, and you're gonna come in groggy or angry, and you're gonna make a bad decision, or it's just a horrible thing. So how do we solve that? So anyway, we went down the path of trying to go do that, and then to really get the trust behind it, we said, okay, we're gonna need to know how to measure quality here. And then Bryson, this very much aligns with you guys because you're like your entire business is measuring the quality and control efficacy of detections, right? And how do we know they're working? How do we know the processes are working? All the rest of that. And so there's a lot of, obviously a good synergy for the topic today, but we've got ideas about it and we can go into it from there. But I ranted just now a little bit. So there you go. Check.
Yeah, but you did it with passion and such optimism. See that? This is what happens when you become a founder. You're like, yeah, now I'm a part of the solution and the problem. And you become more part of the problem as your solution gets more out there, because of course you start finding different challenges in that. You have challenges of scale, you have challenges of user design and inner experience, and then you have the challenges of a lot of these things advance the state of the art, and we suddenly find ourselves now in a new paradigm where there's things we hadn't considered, and that's positive progress. Right. Yeah. It's not, did we solve the whole thing? Like you were telling me beforehand, where the investor's like, are you going to be the next Palo Alto? Because that's how investors think. Like, what's the next $1 billion thing? And it's less that than more of the thousands of the small little companies in cybersecurity who are all advancing these little pockets. And that's good, right? There's an advantage in that. Now, the bad side of that is the corporate experience, right? How am I managing these different platforms? How am I finding ways to optimize what I'm doing from this? So when you were talking about the SOC, that poor tier one analyst, I think, is one of the worst jobs in the industry, because it is very much a left-right function, and the system that I get is not one I really have any control over, right? The SIM, the EDRs that I have to work with, and I am stuck with whatever that is. The way the metaphor I use is, I'm looking in haystacks for needles, right? The needles being potential malicious activity, but I don't even know if there's a needle in the haystack. And mostly the entire approach is just adding more hay, because more visibility equals more data, but that doesn't mean it's the right data or the right visibility. Is working with the people, because it's not really a people job to be doing that effectively.
Yeah, 100%. And I would say it's also why people that have worked in SOC are still some of my, like, no discredit to anyone who's done this. They're some of my favorite people, because you have to deal with reality. I've dealt with a lot of security engineers. They'll go and say, yeah, I know this thing's out here is like potentially vulnerable, whatever. We'll get to it next quarter. A SOC analyst looks at something and goes, well, I've got to learn on this thing right now. So I've got to deal with it like now. Like, I don't get 5 minutes. I don't get an hour. I gotta have an answer for it. I don't care that it's legacy. I don't care that it's RDP to the internet. Like, I don't. And you're going to eventually take it down. You're going to put another like proper VPN or whatever. Like, I don't care. I got to deal with it now. And so like, there's definitely a lot of camaraderie and respect for people that are in that role. And frankly, like, as a red teamer who's gone up against them and tried to outwit them and tried to get them caught in certain scenarios where they're expanding the way they think about, adversaries. That's exactly what we want to we want to capture all of that. And at WireSpeed, what I always tell people is we work cases the way I would work them. We just do it in code.
So yeah, let's talk about that part. Red team, right?
Yeah.
The reason that offense is valuable is because security is defined by the threat. Whatever I've put in place, whether that is a detective control, a protective control, the defense in depth of those controls, it all comes down to, I don't know until somebody else does something, some threat somewhere, whatever that is doing something. And what's my ability for those things to work the way that I think that they're going to work? The challenge, of course, is that security is a constant fight against gravity. So whatever I have put in place changes as the business changes underneath me. Controls break. The other challenge I have is the one of imagination, right? Where are the edges that I didn't think about? Where am I not establishing visibility that I should have? And that's the way that I get surprised. And then there's all these other aspects of it, because it's even where I'm looking, but they're blending into where I'm looking, which is the inherent tradecraft of me reusing your communications, which is why 70% of malware command and control traffic is HTTPS, because I don't have to do anything special. I'm taking advantage of the noise of the natural operations that you're working in. And I think that speaks a lot to where you're talking about breaking the fourth wall in cyber with doing that. But back to, you led one of the largest red teams in the world. And what did you learn from that time period in terms of working with the blue team, in terms of their systems, in, you know, and because I don't want to throw you under the bus, because I think you did some things that I don't think were optimal. So where do you feel that you also could have done things differently, and now having been on the other side, you would have done it?
Well, I'll tell you, the thing I always tell people, there were no products and tools like SCYTHE day one. So like if any of that concept like had existed, so this was 2016 and nothing like that existed at the time, right? We spent.
Well, hold on. We did exist. We were a glimmer in the eye with Target while we were developing them in stealth.
Okay, there you go. There weren't tools like that, and the concept wasn't available. And unit testing and things like Atomic Red Team didn't come out till well after that, and it was very nascent and very simple. So like if I go look at all of that, if I could do it all over again and know this, like the first thing we do is like I have one of my best tweets ever is pen test your prevention controls, unit test your detection controls, and red team your response processes. There's the one I put out that does that, that says that. And I think a lot of people, especially in the early days of red teaming, thought of pen testing or thought of red teaming as pen test plus plus. So I just get big scope. It actually is so far away from that. Like that was one of the first aha moments. Red teaming is actually more blue team than pen test over time, because you're dealing with malware. It's not necessarily finding a vulnerability. It's dealing with process, dealing with tricking people to do stuff a lot of times. For one thing, like in 5 years of doing this, I think we threw less than 10 exploits. And of those 10 exploits, I think it was really probably 3 or 4 exploits repeated, and that we'd find on edge devices or whatever. It's like we didn't do a lot of the things you would find that you would do on a pen test, right? Because we, just not the same. But we didn't have the ability to go and say, okay, I'm gonna take your detection stack and I'm just gonna throw it on the hood and we're just gonna do it. If we had that, we could have taken the company so much farther, so much faster. Absolutely. It's short cycles, because pen tests are a week or 2 long. Red teams, good ones, are months, right? We did red teams up to like 6, 7, 8 months long sometimes, and that's really long if you want to actually like talk about cycle of fixing controls. Because we got to this thing, we told the story, we got to this impact, and it was bad, and that justifies more funding maybe from the board or whatever you want to do, and that's a great use for red teams. But it's not like most companies can't afford that. That's a super big luxury to be able to go spend that much time doing that. And in testing controls in a vacuum is probably a better one. Is that you can go ahead and throw me on the bus a little bit. Is that what you meant by suboptimal?
No, I mean that I think yes, obviously that is suboptimal, right? Because that was that's where I first came on in 2018 in the public sphere, with going on at SchmooCon and saying, hey, we're not doing this right. Red teaming has become, the red teamers that I saw became too focused on the novel, became too focused on what interested them.
Yes.
Because red teaming is a lot of the same thing over and over again.
Yes.
And the red teaming community denigrated operations for that, because they were like, well, we keep telling you what to fix and you're not fixing it. And that's part of why my job is the same thing over and over again. Of course, this is where purple teaming really grew into it, because it's like, yeah, because you write a report, not always the best written report, and where are you to help me fix it? You disappear. And I'm left with a full-time job now, having additional work.
Correct.
And yet you are publicly picking on me for not making things better. What are you doing, right? And I saw this disconnect with what the business valued, because that's the point. It's not about, hey, I beat you here. It's this is a threat. This is what I need to worry about. Where can we do something? In fact, this is where I would really appreciate the work with George Orchias, who's now at Verizon, with the maturity model, because we kept trying to think, it's not that one thing is better than the other, but it's really a question of, in cybersecurity, where am I getting the return on investment for what I'm doing? Right? Yes. I got really spicy the other week where I was like, phishing training is a waste of time.
Yeah.
And what I was trying to do was really provoke a debate, because it's not that phishing training is a waste of time per se, but is that the best place I should spend resources? And what's the real evaluation criteria for doing that, right? Stop with opinions, start driving with evidence and data.
Yeah, I would 100% agree with that. Especially on the specifics of the phishing training. It's important. It should be done. It's a layer. It's like everything else. Everything should be done in layers. And if you can afford everything, you would do everything. We learned, like, obviously I would agree with, we did things in a vacuum in the beginning more so than we did at the end. I would also say every single internal red team I've ever talked to has a story that goes like this: red team, blue team. Red team was ahead. And first exercise, 2, 3, 4, 5, maybe even. Eventually, blue team goes, dude, we're done with this. And it switches places. And then red team goes, what? You mean we don't automatically win? That's a fluke. And they don't change a thing. Boom. And it stays this way for a little bit. It goes a couple exercises. And the red's like, dude, it's supposed to be automatically in our favor, right? It's what the internet says. And then they eventually figure out how to get back ahead. And then this becomes a trading helix. Like, it gets really tight coupled. Part of the reason why I left at the end was like the coupling was really tight and there wasn't enough really for me to do there anymore. And I see that over and over again. And I know that they've even advanced, that same team has advanced since then, where they've got a mix of what we would call purple teaming. And they've got a mix of looking for things like on the breaches, I would say on the external attack surface, and then opportunistic stuff. And then a mix of very campaign specific. I'm going after a specific business unit for a specific data set for a specific reason, right? And I think all of those are good. I think most companies can't afford that level of depth, right? Like, that's not something that's super common to be able to do all those things. But yeah, and I would say going back to the original question, Bryson, what did we learn? So we learned that number one, I've talked about this before. The red teams a lot of times act like they are the Conor McGregors, but really they're the Conor McGregor trainer that nobody knows, right? Like, you're not the guy in the ring is the blue team. You're just the guy that shows up and gets, throws some punches and kicks and gets hit occasionally. You're not the one. So I think that's something I learned. The other thing I think I learned is that there's, not that I want to go down this can of worms, so they're probably going to pop it anyway. We'll see where you take it.
Oh, we're doing it.
Here it goes. What's the official term of this? The disclosure debate that's been going on for 30 years. Public disclosure. Do I disclose a vulnerability? Do I talk about this thing? Do I not? And then as it's gone into techniques and TTPs and specifically into tradecraft and tools, I have been on both sides of that. I'm pretty firm on the camp of, will you guys knock it off? Stop. You get your 10 minutes of Twitter fame. That's great. Thank you. We're actually seeing this in breaches. And I am glad to know that all the tools I've ever done have either been feature incomplete, so they're not useful, right? Or they're just examples, TTPs pulled out under a microscope or whatever you can go take, and you have to go build something. But I don't have my name on anything that's in a breach. Like, I've never seen anyone show me one. If I'm wrong, I'd love to see it. But I think that's something that's a problem, right? Like, we have this mentality of like, oh, we need to just do whatever. And I think part of it, and you probably would agree with this, comes out of the fact that most red teamers are contractors. They're consultants. And so they're free to talk. And some of the most amazing work I've ever heard in my life can't be discussed because it's blue teamers that work for their employer. They're not contractors, right? And they can't do it. Like, maybe you can go get some IR guys, the consultants that can tell stories without saying who it is. And that's always fun and exciting. But the SecOps guys that are just in the weeds, that are just behind the zipper, that just can't tell you. That's real work. There's a lot of value in that.
Yeah, contractors obviously under NDA as well, but you can speak generally about it. Whereas when you're tied to one company, there's no anonymity that's assigned there.
Yeah. And in my time, I had to be very careful what I said and what I didn't say. I still probably do, but yeah, I would say that those are the biggest things for me. I was learning, that there's a lot of blue teamer guys that were really, really good at what they did and really, really cared, and definitely were hamstrung by the current investments. Right. I saw some heroic efforts to pull detections out of, the attic based on what was available in terms of tools. It was also really fun. There was at least one time where a detection that was purpose built for defined us was used and caught an actual threat actor early and crushed it. And I really, that was probably one of my most proud moments, is to see that actually happened. Right. So
you up front noted two value propositions. The first being contextualizing incidents and alerts, right? Which is a really hard problem.
It is really, yeah.
Because I mean, again, going back to we were talking about the OPSEC, the tradecraft that's built into threat operation. I'm blending. I'm intentionally blending. I mean, I'm doing one of two things. I am beating the defensive tools that you're using for visibility on your host because I already know that they're there. So I've defeated those before I've even started. So whether I'm denying them, degrading them, or deceiving them, problem solved. And then in command and control, right, my comms, that's the one place where I can't hide because I have to go to ones and zeros like everybody else. However, I am blending into hundreds of megabytes, hundreds of gigabytes of data. And unless I'm doing it at 3 a.m. direct to .ru, you're not seeing that.
Correct. I would say, yeah, I can't even think of an example, not just anything that I've ever done, but anything that anyone's ever done that's ever told me where they were caught by network comms. Never once.
Yep.
Not in a real scenario. There's always ways around it. I mean, we even in the beginning built all kinds of really cool stuff in our tooling where we would round robin between C2 domains, and we even had we went to the nth degree to blur it in, where we had preambles and postambles. So before I made my C2 message, I could go make a bunch of fake HTTP calls to make it look like a real session, do my C2 message, do a bunch of postamble calls to make it look like a real thing, and blur it in. But you know what? That didn't matter. It really didn't matter.
Yeah. And so there's now two aspects of this, right? There's the externality, which I think people over focus on because most people, when they think threat intelligence, again, Dave Bianco did such a great job with the pyramid of pain of really highlighting what most of what we get for threat intelligence is, which is the bottom pieces, right? The stale IOCs of domain, hash, and IP, because those are machine readable. And more importantly, I have almost 100% confidence that that's a bad thing. But the reality is that the sexy CTI of speaking different languages, camping out on the dark web to find what's the latest, Packer or access implant that's there. Most people can't afford that. It doesn't really do what you think you're doing. EPSS, I think, is statistically starting to do a better job. So for those of you who aren't aware of that, that's the exploit predictability scoring system. They're on version 3. You can find it at first.org. There's a free API to enrich your data sets, so you can pull that. And I was really dim on the project to begin with because I was like, yeah, I'm seeing this. But again, you're highlighting things, but you're not highlighting the things that I actually care about. Because from an externality perspective, and so they've gotten better at narrowing that. Now we get to the internal stuff, which we get to the challenge of, well, what does an asset mean? Well, a business has to decide what an asset is. And of course, nobody has a CMDB that actually gives them anything of any value. So it's not there. And then it's not even the asset itself, right? It's what that asset might have access to, which was my 2018 RSA talk on IoT, where everybody was like, they're looking to look at you coming out of the shower. And I'm like, no, it's an entire visible subset of asset class that has access to everything. And it's my way in, and you'll never see it because you're not looking there. And then to what we do at SCYTHE, which is, okay, so I can't tell you what those things are worth, but what I can tell you is what would the impact be? What would the behavioral profiling and signaling look like as you're able to walk through either a threat-based scenario of this is what a threat would do and what that would look like, or a controls-based scenario where it's more like, I want to understand the compliance of the controls, and I don't necessarily care so much about the accurate threat behavior, more of a comprehensive signaling to be able to find the contours of what I have.
Yeah. A lot to unpack. Like, I agree.
I just said a lot.
I've never seen a CMDB that works. That is good. The closest I've ever seen is really good vuln scan reports becoming a de facto CMDB because they're more accurate because they know what's actually on the network. I've seen that happen. We have a quasi CMDB like thing inside of WireSpeed because, like, one of the complaints I always heard about MDR providers is like customers would say, well, you didn't really learn me. You didn't really learn who we are, who our people are, whatever. So we build directory integrations. We learn, like, we have rules for looking at titles and things like that. Here's your VIPs. Here's your technical people. We treat them differently. VIPs get white glove service. Technical users might get asked a question, like the classic thing I always tell people: if I see sketchy PowerShell and you're a sales guy, I'm going straight to containment. If I see your job title is software engineer 3, let's go hit you up on Slack and ask if this is what you meant to do, right? And just confirm that you're aware. And because we're able to do it like within seconds of the event, it's not like you're asking like, what did you do last Tuesday? It's like, no, what did you do 2 minutes ago, right? And they're like, oh, no, I just did this thing. I downloaded this thing, and like, nope, that wasn't. I didn't intend to run any PowerShell anything. Okay, cool. All right, let's start talking about containment and like get the next step out of it. So it's stuff like that that I think that matters. But like going back to all this, like the overarching topic of quality and how to measure quality, we went down this path trying to figure out, okay, so quality is a big challenge in cyber, knowing what's good and what's not. And what we really need is a methodology. And we're trying to figure out like what's a good methodology that's used somewhere else. And we look for
why is it hard? Why have we not established quality of security?
It's too much stuff is subjective, for one, probably not enough data for two. A lot of times things are short-lived. So in the case of like MDR, especially, if I'm a customer and I get, I've got all this crazy amount, I'd throw out some number, but it would mean nothing. I've got all this telemetry. The telemetry breaks down to alerts. The alerts break down to cases. The cases eventually end up in escalations or containments or whatever. And all this is moving so fast. Also, by the way, I've got 25 things to do today. The 26th is now to look at this case that just came over to me. I may only have enough time to look at the case. I may not have enough time to come back and give you a plus, like a thumbs up or thumbs down, or like a quality score. I may just have a subjective, like, I think you're good, I don't think you're good. And maybe I don't have time to like capture that and give you that intelligence back. So it's really hard to kind of get all that. So going back to this, for us to go for cyber as an industry to move towards automation, we've got all this AI stuff that everyone talks about, and like, I'll put $1 in the jar. I just said it. How do we know that it's going to work? And one of the problems with these tools that are based on LLMs is, by their very definition, they're not testable, right? They have randomness in them, right? Or the fancy word is stochasticity, intentional randomness. If I give you this input, and that's why like you ask ChatGPT certain questions, and it's going to give you you ask it 25 times, and you're going to get 23 and a half different answers. And you're not, so like we've actually gone down the road. We've played with LLMs and turned all the temperature down and try to, control as much as we can and make it as tonal flat as possible. And like at best, we've been able to get a 50%, predictability rate on responses. And that's terrifying when it comes to making decisions around security events. Just stop and think about that. Right. And like, the Apple guys just did that report and they came out and said, well, guess what? You've been asking why we're not messing around with LLMs or letting all these other companies do it. It's because we don't actually think they can reason. And they wrote a big white paper about it. And in there, one of the extract quotes is something around the effect of, if I put an LLM summary about or a recommendation of a product on an e-commerce checkout page, I go to this retailer and I recommend, here, you should buy the blue and the green widget. And I'm wrong 15% of the time, no big deal. Like, they just don't buy. It doesn't convert. Or they convert, they buy and go, I didn't like this, and they return it. It's not life or death. Imagine in cyber if we were 15% wrong. Like, that's horrifying. We can't even afford to be, even like 1% wrong. So going back to like, we want something that's predictable. It's got to be measurable. It's got to be repeatable. And we searched the world, and we found this little thing. And I think, Bryson, I'm guessing you've actually probably got some exposure to it in your DoD days. It's called AQL, acceptable quality limits. It's an ISO standard, became the DoD. Fun thing is, I've got this nice World War II photo behind me to remind me that, by the way, any day that's a bad day at work is not as bad as that day. And so back in that time frame when they're like, okay, we've got supplies, we got to go ship to the GIs and fight Nazis. I got a case lot of ammunition. How many rounds of this case lot do I test fire before I know that the case is good? I can't shoot all of them, and I can't shoot none of them. There's got to be a number. What's the right number? And they brought all these math PhDs together and try to figure out like, what's the right number? Let's get a statistical model. And out came AQL. And it's this, I've given a batch size of things. I randomly pull n number of them. I test them for critical, major, and minor defects. And if I'm within acceptable quality limits, which by default most people just do 0% deep criticals, which in this terminology means something that's a safety hazard. Great example of this, like if you've got kids and you have toys that are manufactured somewhere, there's somebody in that toy factory that randomly pulled the toys and they did AQL on them, promise you. And they look for things like sharp edges. Is there anything in here that's going to cut a kid's finger? And that's a safety issue, right? We can't tolerate, if we find even one, the entire batch has to be adjudicated. Like, we're going to look at every one of them if we have even one safety issue. And so we applied this same thing now to WireSpeed, to our batch of verdicts. So we take all the verdicts of all cases, we batch them up, We randomly pull, and I look for critical, major, and minor defects. Critical for us is we didn't tell a customer about something we should have. If we do that, like, dude, we're going through the entire batch by hand, humans looking at them going, what's going on, then fixing the code problem, what's there. It doesn't happen often. It has happened a couple occasional times. I think any SOC is lying if they say this won't happen at some point. But we just wanted a way to prove it and measure it out. So we built this, stuff around AQL. And by the way, if you go to wirespeed.co/AQL, we've got a calculator you can go use because it's to go do it for yourself. So like if you're a pen test firm, like let's say you're a SCYTHE customer and you're like, hey, I'm a purple team. I'm writing detections. I want to know my detections work. I'm going to take all my detections in batches. I'm going to run scenarios through them, and I'm going to go measure them for critical, major, minor defects, which you define based on there's guidance on what that means. And you can use the little table and you can know how many of those you need to go pull. Or if you're doing it live, you can go and say, okay, I'm going to go look in my sim right now. I'm going to go look at what my tool is. I'm going to go pull these things out in a batch and like randomly sample them based on the tables and go and do it. And there's a calculator that does all the calculations for you. So you don't have to understand it. You just literally go, okay, I've got 200. I'm pulling whatever the number is. And we can pull it up live if you want. We can share it. It's like right here. Let's see if I can present. Window. So here it is right here. Bing. Is that showing?
Nope.
No. Oh, doggone. Well, we'll put a link in, or we'll put a comment after the show then. Sorry about that. But anyway, it really isn't showing.
It really is not showing, Tim. I promise you, I am not red teaming you in real life.
All right. Well, whatever. That's fine.
Deception technology. Here you go.
Yeah. Nice job. I did not have the share screen permission, so that's fine. Anyway, so like that's something I think is really near and dear to my heart, because in order to make cyber better, we need to be able to, have good metrics around it. Back to your point, Bryce, like you said this a minute ago, you need to be able to know the ROI of things. One way to do the ROI of things is, to be able to study the quality of it, be able to prove that it's repeatable and measurable.
So you'd mentioned AI earlier, because we're probably also required to say MITRE ATT&CK at least 17 times, or MITRE will suddenly appear out of the shadows and wag their finger at it. But that brings up the point, because of course MITRE ATT&CK is the corpus of the training data that folks look at. First point being is there's a lag from real world to MITRE ATT&CK. Second of all, even with that lag, there's still going to be things that happen outside of it. So it's great, but it's imperfect. Not that doesn't have value, but recognizing that from a training data set, which is what we're talking about, it's not going to be perfect. Then the second problem that I see is the traditional breach and attack simulation approach of let's turn those into check boxes, right? I'm going to run each of the low-level techniques in that tactic, and I'm going to do that one, and see, you now got green, yellow, and red.
But whose definition of those?
By whose definition? Well, that methodology is already inherently flawed.
Yeah.
Right? Because an attack is state-based. An attack does not do a procedure and go, I stole credentials. Check.
You're good.
Right? What I do next. And the reason that this is so important for what you're doing at WireSpeed is because what I do next is going to look different. It's not even I'm doing a different command, but the signal looks different. Because if I have privileges, what I do next looks different, right? Going back to blending into tradecraft, I'm an authorized user doing something versus I have to try to do an exploit. Well, that looks different. Or, whatever that is, it's going to look different each one. So it's understanding, and this is, again, we're having a realistic threat basis for that signal is valuable, because I'm building a high fidelity training data set now, as opposed to, again, just MITRE ATT&CK bingo card coverage. Now here's your AQL.
Yes. Yeah, 100%. And also the other big problem that people have with this is, like, if I go to run this test, let's just say it isn't a flawed methodology, Bryson, and I really do want to put individual TTPs under the microscope, and I just want to test one TTP. How do you stage that? How do you get that? How do you get to that point in the chain without tripping EDR or whatever first? That is such a hard problem, right? So if I'm going to come in like, okay, cool. Well, the fact that I'm over here maybe grabbing a handle in this other memory or this other process and allocating memory and then writing to it and then running my code there, my technique, guess what? Now CrowdStrike or whatever just goes and crushes it. Does that mean that I have coverage for that technique? It doesn't. No, it means that something about that was covered. Maybe it was the way you staged it. like, oh, okay, well, here's what we're gonna do. We're gonna unhook CrowdStrike. We're gonna unhook it. We're gonna blind it. Or, like your 3Ds a minute ago. Deny, deceive, and what was the other one?
Oh, so there's actually it's now D4M, but the three that you're going to do on host are deny, right? I can disable what you're doing. I can deceive, I can avoid it, and I can degrade it.
Degrade it. Okay. So we did one of those three. I'm unhooked, and now I drop my thing over here. But hold on, it runs and it doesn't get caught. Well, it's because you unhooked it. Oh, well, I'm going to rehook it. Wait, how are you going to like how do you put it under isolation and actually measure it? And I think the answer is you probably can never do it. So you've got this other problem of even if I wanted to go down that route, like good luck, you probably can never do it.
I'm throwing in the chat for those of you who want to nerd out on DoD doctrine on how to create effects in multi-domain operations. And you can explore further on why I was talking about D4M with the 3Ds on host.
Yes, I just now realized this chat's not for just you and me. So I'm gonna go put.
Well, there's two sides to it. There's our internal one.
I didn't see the other one. Like, here you go. All right, guys. Here's the AQL link I was trying to put out there earlier. You guys go knock yourselves out and use the calculator. And there's some blogs out there for you as well. Yeah. So anyway, quality matters. All of it's hard. Everything sucks. Back to that. We were talking about the investor asking me if you want to be the next Palo Alto, and I said no. I want to solve the problem. Like that was my actual answer. I just want to actually contain correctly, right? The whole goal is to make it really, really hard. I want to make it where threat actors, in order to be successful at things like ransomware, have to use so much automation that it just becomes whose algorithm is better. That's what I want to get to, right? Yeah. That sounds like a fun game. Let's get there.
Yeah, no, this is where I like what Andrew Thompson at Mandy at Google says.
Yes.
Is, I mean, his Twitter handle is imposed cost,
yes.
Which is, again, that's the ROI. ROI is not that I have solved security. ROI is that I have made it more expensive. And more expensive means that you now need to do like custom tooling. You can't rely on PowerShell. It means you need to be doing specialized infrastructure, right? Any one of those things make me a harder target, which means you have to be more deliberate. The other element with the defense in depth being done that appropriately, which is where heterogeneous controls are valuable, is as an attacker, I am not omniscient. I didn't breach you and instantly know everything. There is a further iterative intelligence operation for me to figure out where I want to go, how I'm going to get there, and then walking my way there. Any kind of heterogeneity that you throw to me is a point that I have to pause and think and go, all right, what's happening now? And again, based on my mission parameters will dictate whether I don't care and I'm going smash and grab. And I don't care about being noisy because I'm just going to beat you to the fact that your alerts and telemetry take 24 hours to get to a human to even then possibly screw it up by then going to virus total and, looking up what PowerShell.exe means, which I've seen before. Right?
Yes.
Or I'm going to be stealthy and I'm going to now take my time to passively understand because I have a longer term mission for a bigger payoff.
Yeah. So that reminds me so much of was it the TransUnion or was it Experian, the big breach a few years back where there's like the big complaint everyone talked about, well, there's like a Java struts vulnerability that was in a web app that was facing the internet that was sitting out there.
I think you're talking about Equifax.
Maybe Equifax.
Yeah, I actually know the guy in charge of security who was over that, and he is very bitter because he got completely dragged by his own company. It's so sad.
Well, you'd have all these pundits come out of nowhere, and they just say, "Well, yeah, they didn't patch their stuff and whatever." And I was like, "Hold on. First of all, having a red team experience and background changes your opinion dramatically. Just because I found a vulnerability and I popped it and I have a shell does not mean this is Vegas and like." Ping, 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 all the PIIs just coming out like coins, right? It doesn't just happen that way. They had to
That's going to be a GIF, by the way. I'm totally going to make that into a GIF if you do.
That'd be great. That'd be great. Like vulnerability. But you have to find an old Vegas machine because they don't do that anymore. You just get a receipt. You go take it over and you get a gift card back and like, yay. But anyway, so like that's this philosophy that this is all there is, right? Like I'm just going to go and all this stuff comes out. No, they were in the environment for months. Learning the land, and I used to refer to that as adversary onboarding. That was my nickname for it when we were doing red team work. Like I'm onboarding. I'm an undocumented admin. I'm onboarding myself in. I'm going to go read the wikis, the Confluence page, the SharePoints, all the things, figure out where stuff is. We used to do this, and I go, look, oh, cool, found your PCI docs. Okay, cool. This is where the credit cards will be in memory, unencrypted for just a few minutes or seconds. It's fine enough either way. So this is our target. We used to go do that kind of stuff to figure out where we're going. I'm going to drop here a link in chat about, this is from a blog post we just posted out from a real case a couple weeks ago on the 14th of November. I think it was the 14th. 214 seconds. So we have a customer whose creds, we don't know how they were stolen, somehow got tricked, got their credit stolen. The victim was actually an accountant for a company. So very, very, high likelihood of being a BEC type, threat. Because, get the credits, go log into Office 365, go do whatever. And they did try to log into Microsoft. Microsoft went and alerted us. We took that case apart. We looked at it and said, dude, this is in a weird location. The ISP actually has an abuse contact in Singapore. This is not looking good. And we went and pinged the user and said over email, because that's how their integration was set up. And we said, hey, did you just 2.5 minutes ago log in from Santa Clara, California? And she said, no. And we, within 1 second, have her account rotated, her credentials, her credentials are rotated, her sessions are all killed off, and that threat actor didn't get that, right? And what I love about that, because I've been on the other side as a red teamer, where you spend a lot of time, you build tradecraft, and you get it all perfect, and we had age domains, and we had all this stuff, whatever, and we'd be going along, and all of a sudden the line goes dead, and carrier lost kind of thing, and you're like, wait, why did it break? And I've seen red teamers kind of go both directions. I've seen them go, oh, magic detect. They must have amazing magic detections, right? That's the one thing I've seen them do. But more commonly than that is, oh, well, something just must be broken. And I've got my 18 redirectors. I'm going to go check each hop and make sure everything's good. Everything's green. Oh, it's all green. I don't get it. Why did it die? Like, did you ever maybe stop and think that maybe something you did got you detected and you got contained? No, it can't be that. Can't be that. But you can't, like, in that, like any other help desk or any other troubleshooting type scenario, if you're like in a help desk or whatever, you can pick up the phone and go, hey, Bryson, can you do me a favor? Can you double check? Is this process still running? Can you open up Task Manager? Cool. Can you go check Netstat? You see a port in there? Cool. Okay, great. You can't do that to your victim. Hey, is my implant still running on your box? No, it's not running. It's contained. Oh, you don't have access anymore? Oh, incident response is literally standing at your desk right now. Cool. Okay, thank you very much. You can't do that stuff, right? So, like, I love to sit here and think that I took some poor schmuck's bad guy's bad day and ruined it because we crushed the account that they got, and they probably went and did automated adversary in the middle, probably got 12 credentials that hour through that infrastructure before it got taken down. And somewhere along there, like they were going back and like, yeah, I got all these credits. Well, why this one doesn't work anymore? Oh, well. And they moved on to the next customer, right? The next victim, but it wasn't ours, right? And this is the kind of stuff we're trying to do. We just want to get, where we can make really good decisions really fast. We don't need to be the cybersecurity ivory tower that sits in the background. Like, dude, cyber dudes will spend so much energy and money trying to figure out if something is bad without talking to a victim.
Mm-hmm.
Stop thinking about that. We will. Oh, I ran through my adversarial. I ran through my ML model. I ran through Z-square analysis. I did, anomaly detection. I'm trying to forget the words, but I ran through all this different analysis, and they came out. And I think there's like a 63% chance this is bad. Or, like, while you did all of that, we just asked them, did you log in from frickin' Santa Clara through an ISP? We know it's a hosting provider. What are you doing? No. Cool. Thank you. All we need to know. Your account's gonna get reset here in just a minute. It's gonna go dark, but it's okay. We'll guide you through the reset, and then that's how we do it.
So what have you learned now that WireSpeed is out there, out of stealth, and engaging with customers and doing things?
That's a great question, Bryson. For one, I've learned how excited I get every time I see a solid escalation or containment. I mean, I just get so excited when I see it work, right? So you see cases like this one that we highlighted. There's been others, and or even the other thing is we see, an EDR go, this looks like ransomware, and we're able to deconflict it in a second. And nope, it's not. No one had that customer didn't get spun up with a ransomware alert that day. You imagine the heart attack you'd get if you got like a ransomware alert and then you're like, dude, my day is wrecked. And some people don't even have the skill set to necessarily deconflict it. But even if they did, it's an afternoon, and then it's just a major interruption and huge anxiety. We're able to go do it, through automation. So like both those extremes really make me excited. I think other things that are interesting is One of the things that is unique about us is because we're using automation, we are actually less expensive. And trying to sell through partners sometimes can be a challenge, because a lot of the incentive model is to sell. I hate to break this to everyone who's watching. The incentive model a lot of times is how much GP, how much gross profit is going to go to the reseller. And that reseller, unfortunately, sometimes, not all of them, not all of our partners, but there's a few, are doing this mental math where they go, dude, I can spend 40 hours with this client, and I was about to drop names of all the MSSPs that are subpar that would generate double the gross profit for them, and they could go buy through them, right, and get a deal, and that like they could close that deal just fine. The sales rep's going to make more money and for that time, or they could go through us and get probably half, because we literally advertise that we'll cut your MDR bill in half,
which means they make less.
They make less. They have to spend, sometimes they'll spend the same amount of time. So like one of the problems is we got to figure out, how do you get a sales rep to spend less time with the customer so they get the trade-off of time to value for them back. And that's honestly a real challenge. But we're trying to be disruptive. We're not trying to be the next Palo Alto. So we honestly want to get MDR in the hands of more companies. We want to get people that have either had a bad experience with it, or are like, dude, like another big thing for us is a lot of MSSPs and a lot of MDRs don't really do the D part. They don't really do the detection part. They say, yeah, oh, don't worry, like for this, and I'll make up a number, but these aren't wrong. Like for this $200,000 a year contract, which is pretty typical for a mid-market company to spend that much money in a MSSP. For this $200,000 a year contract, we're gonna write you custom rules and do all this stuff, and stop and think about what that means. I've got another, since we're dropping blog links, I'll grab this one while we're at it. Where I actually break down the math behind this. And since you said you like market economics these days, this will be a fun one for you.
I mean, it's the reality. Market economics are how all of this works. That's why I thought it was interesting, where I already could pick up on the economic decision. Again, it wasn't a security decision. It was an economic decision that was being made, because that's how it works.
Yeah. Yes, very much. So if you scroll all the way down, about 2/3, 3/4 of the way down that article, you'll see in there some numbers. So CrowdStrike's 2024 detection, just picking on them, or I should say R&D spend for 2024, because they're publicly traded. It's all, public knowledge. $778 million, $750 million are being spent on R&D, which is just like jaw dropping, hit the floor, go 3 floors down. Like, it's crazy how much money that is. So stop and think about that. If we are super conservative, we say, well, you know what? Not all of it's, detection. Some of it's new products, some of it's integration, some of it's whatever. Cool. Let's just say 10% of that conservatively is detection engineering. That's $78 million. That next one down is an actual real large MSSP that I will not name, that I'm familiar with their internal workings. Not one I worked at, by the way. An even other one. Say that. And they spend about $3 million on R&D. And how do I get the number? They got about 15 people doing detection engineering. If you round them out about $200K a pop, that's $3 million. That last super large enterprise, you might guess it might be an employer I used to work at, Fortune 1, largest company in the world. They spend somewhere probably around $1 million. It's about 5 people plus or minus, give or take. And that's like OSINT. You can kind of figure that out anyway. So if you stop and look at this, what that tells me is enterprises should not be building detections. Like they're not going to have the money. It's not even the largest company in the world is maybe 1/78th if we conservatively estimate what CrowdStrike can do, maybe. And if I look at the large MSSP who very much advertises, we're going to do your detections for you, they're not. There's no way they are for $3 million compared to just one vendor. So my takeaway is that all of this, the detection engineering content and skill set, needs to centralize in about 100 companies, not in 10,000. We don't need a detection engineer in every company around the world. We just need them in a handful of places. And how do we get them? How do we get there? Like, if we really think about, I'm going to drop another stupid buzzword, the labor and talent shortage in cyber. Like, we've got all this.
I like that got an accent too. That really punctuated. I don't know where it came from. Well done, Tim.
I can't do it again, so it's there. But if I have to say it just ridiculously, so if we talk about the talent shortage, well, maybe we were trying to put people in positions that they shouldn't be in. Right? Maybe, and it's not because the person doesn't have the capability of doing the role, but maybe that person should do that role at a product company and not at a 5,000 employee enterprise. Right? Maybe that's not where it is a good use of labor. So if we start thinking about things like that, then we're like, okay, well, how do we make this happen? Right? Well, one way we make this happen as a catalyst is we have MDR companies like mine that say, we're not going to lie to you. We're not really building detections. What we're really building is the best response processes in the world that we can possibly come up with. And by being less expensive and by being automated, what we can actually allow you to do is go buy the best detection product yourself. Because guess what? You're going to spend the same amount of money and you're going to have a better outcome. I'm not going to just go grab as much revenue as I can. I want you to be protected, because that's why we're doing this. So
I think, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was gonna say that's it. That's the reason why we're approaching this differently.
Yeah, but I think you and I actually, with SCYTHE and WireSpeed, we had a similar challenge with Origin, because what we were doing was automating elements of red teaming.
Yes.
And the challenge with that was the red teamers were like, you can't automate us. We're all too smart. And it's like, I'm not replacing you as a human, right?
Yeah.
I'm not pretending to be a reasoning LLM, which is actually not a thing. That's not what LLM can do anyway.
Yes.
But I can take things that you do and I can repeat those and I can scale those and I can make it easier for you to be able to find the edges to, again, to drive that signaling where I need the security use case to do it, which is the point. The challenge where we talk about centralizing detections, and this is why there is no, one of the reasons there's no silver bullet to cybersecurity, is your security is yours. It's the one time I will not facetiously say you are in fact a unique snowflake, because your assets, your people, and the way that those work and how that works and the configurations and all of that, there's a very limited amount. Again, this is why detective controls are so popular, because that's the line I can walk up to. And if I get a false positive on a detective control, I didn't stop or break something. I just got somebody's attention and wasted it. We're okay wasting a SOC analyst's time.
Well, we shouldn't be, but yes.
We could debate it, but we are okay as an industry.
Better than making
a mistake with a SOC analyst's time versus, and I mean reasonably, than breaking a business process, because 100%. That means revenue and things aren't happening.
Yes.
Going to the good side of what's one of the things that I've seen and what makes me happy. So you talked about where you detect or contain something and you see the success. Ours is when folks use SCYTHE and they're spending 6 to 7 digits on something. And they've always spent 6 to 7 digits on that thing. And every year the price goes up double digits in percentage and they have to pay more, and they feel stuck with it. And there's two aspects that I really like. One is when they use our tool and they're like, oh, that's how that works, right? Testing the assumptions. And this isn't to throw salespeople under the bus. It's the fact that you got to make it yours. And what it actually does, it's not that it didn't do it, but how it does it really makes a big difference. And understanding that, watching those lights go on. The second, which has become a lot more popular, again, going back to market economics since 2022, is them going, you know what? We don't need that. And here's the data to show that we don't need that. Here is what we are going to do instead. And again, data evidence-driven approach to making that decision. Here's how I can take that out, take that money, and back to ROI, reinvest that money in other things. I love being able to help provide those insights and rationalize with SCYTHE.
Yes. I mean, that makes perfect sense. Dustin asked a question in
I was going to throw that at you, but I already have an answer.
So I see, where to even go?
Well, first, I'll ask the question so people who know what it is. All right. How do you see the role of offensive security and red teaming evolving in response to the growing sophistication of AI-driven cyber threats?
Okay. First, what's an AI-driven cyber threat?
Yeah.
Show me one.
So let's talk about what AI actually does. First of all, you're not seeing real artificial intelligence out there. What you're seeing, and this is what Tim was talking earlier about LLMs, is you basically have an incredibly simplistic mathematical model that has been refined with a level of complexity that is now able to do the things that it is doing. The same advancements in functionality, which are forcing CISOs to now have to accept artificial intelligence in the workplace because the business wants it, is the same thing we're seeing threat actors benefit from. I can take data at large and craft spear phishing at large, at scale, as opposed to me individually as a human doing it. You mentioned stochastic earlier. I'll throw out O of N, right? I can now do O of N by O of N complexity of work because that is something an LLM can do well. I can automate elements of my infrastructure. So my gray space between red bad, blue good. I can automate those elements and make that, more of a dynamic thing now as you're continuing to burn them and do that. That's something that can manage for me. And then, of course, right, the final piece is it can help me with development. But I still need an operator. I still need a developer to confirm what it's done, because I can't take those outputs. The future state of Skynet actually driving its own operational malware, we're not there. That's not a current thing to worry about. So I'll summarize this with my favorite metaphor that takes 20 seconds to explain AI to everybody. Go Google this, the racist soap dispenser. And what happens in the racist soap dispenser is you see a traditional soap dispenser in a bathroom, and you see somebody with dark skin trying to get soap. This is my GIF. No soap. So he takes a white paper towel, puts it under soap. What did we learn? Do we think the engineers are racist? Of course not. But they didn't have proper training data to make an effective system. There was unconscious bias in how they built that training data. Now in operations, they don't have execution guardrails, which that phrase found familiar in the offensive world. Execution guardrails around what happens when something goes out of tolerance. That, in summary, is the policy and understanding and the challenges of artificial intelligence, and what I think is a very easy to follow AI story.
Yeah, I would say that the AI challenge is definitely more social and things like that nature than it is. I mean, obviously, if you go hook up your Copilot and it starts reading stuff and it starts leaking it back out, that's a different problem. But there's other companies solving that. But
see Jake Williams. Jake has lots of rants on that.
Yeah, that's not I think what most people are worried about. Most people are worried about like, I would say your examples are good. I think the other example is like, hey, I don't speak English as a natural language, and now I want perfectly grammatically correct English. In fact, actually, what's funny is Oxford University reported a bunch of phishing. This is a couple months back. It was in the news. I don't have the link handy anyway. They reported a bunch of phishing cases, and it was weird as the wording. And I was just reading this article that had screenshots of these phishing, and I was like, oh, I guarantee that came from ChatGPT, because I continually see this one phrase over and over again in all the results I've got. Most likely, bad guy was probably he was probably Russian, not English, and needed proper English, and because he's phishing people at Oxford of all places, right, where they wrote the dictionary. And so they just ran it through, and that's how it came out. And like, you're going to see stuff like that. And you also see threat actors, and you see pen testers do the same thing, where like, I've got a shell, what do I do? And they're just asking a little model to go help them with next steps. It's really no different than Googling, other than like it maybe is a little smarter in terms of the output, but it's just making you a little bit faster, but it's not the real thing, right? That example I gave earlier about smashing an account in 214 seconds, I guarantee there was an interactive bad guy in there somewhere. They had to wait. I mean, they might have certain automations, like, but at some point there might be a concern that we got a threat actor that gets access to a mailbox or something, and suddenly fires off a script to go do all this persistence and grabbing, and like that very well could happen. I mean, that's what I would do if I was red teaming right now. I would just be building it that way. I would do that way out of laziness anyway. But we don't see that with all of them, right? Like not like some of these ransomware people are really not, honestly, I'm going to say this, not that bright, right? They're barely competent.
They don't have to be.
Correct.
Again, back to the imposed cost, the adversary will go to the level that they're required and no further.
Yes. Right. If I can get paid and I can do sloppy techniques, then I'll do it. If I can get paid and I can just click around, I'll do it. I mean, that's like, how do we find some threat actors, and how we identify them is they're clearly copying and pasting into terminals, and they're the same typos.
All right. So I'm gonna have to close you out because we're at time. So
yeah.
Last thoughts you want to leave the audience dying for?
Last thoughts. Thank you for having me. It was good to see all you guys. Hit us up if you got questions. If you can find us on LinkedIn, Twitter, whatever. We definitely we really care about quality. Like we are technical people first and foremost. We're security people trying to just flip an entire category around. So help us out. And because we are passionate tech and business people, what I will say is, whether you are working on getting acceptable quality for really getting your detections and containment where you want, WireSpeed, and if you want to help drive that signal, follow us at SCYTHE. Yeah, absolutely. 100%. Thank you.